one of my pet peeves is when people give blanketed advice to people without understanding their situation. So for someone to say, if you're looking at anything less than 100 units, you're wasting your time. I just think that's terrible feedback. You don't
Right.
know this person's situation, capabilities, network, like goals. So how can I say that to someone, right? So I would start by saying, what are you trying to accomplish, and then what do you have available to you? Like that should dictate what you do.
You are now listening to the Your First Steps podcast. It's great to talk about $1 million dreams, but where do we start? How do we get there? Listen up as you hear directly from real estate industry leaders on how they reach success in their fields. And most importantly, what were their first steps? Let's get this party started. Here's your host, Eli the Real Estate Guy.
Hey, how's it going, guys? Thank y'all so much for tuning into another episode of the Your First Steps podcast. So today we have a very, very special guest. He is a multifamily investor and a syndicator. Today we have Mr. John Casmon. John, how you doing today, man?
Hey, Eli, I'm doing great. Thank you for having me on the show today. It's great to be here. Pleasure to be here, and I'm excited to have this conversation.
Awesome. Good deal. So for the folks that do not know who you are, give a quick introduction of who you are for the folks that don't know who you are.
Yeah, I'm a multifamily investor. I've invested in over $125 million worth of real estate, particularly apartments, usually I shouldn't say usually, but mostly through the Midwest and the Southeast region. And we partner with everyday professionals to get the benefits of real estate investing without the headaches of being a landlord themselves, right? Prior to going into real estate full time, I was in corporate America doing marketing and advertising for about 15 years. I worked at General Motors. I worked on brands like Nike, Coors Light, Mountain Dew, a lot of different TV campaigns, events, all those kind of things. But for me, what happened was I realized my W-2 job really wasn't guaranteed. I was at GM when we went through bankruptcy. I watched it firsthand. I watched my bosses on, cable news channels talking about the state of things. And I watched my peers, lose their jobs or have their lives impacted. So I looked for a plan B that was real estate, started investing, with a mindset to develop passive income. And over time realized that, in order to really scale the way I wanted to, I was going to need to partner with others. And that ultimately led me into real estate syndication.
Gotcha. Good deal. All right. And so, and we'll get into all the syndication and everything that you're doing now. But from what I found is whenever I'm speaking to folks on this podcast, on whatever aspect of real estate that they're doing, something usually happened during their childhood or they're exposed to real estate at some point. So kind of take me back to what it was like growing up for you in your household. And then we'll kind of gradually go to where you are now. So what was it like growing up for you?
Yeah. So, growing up, it's interesting, right? Because there's my version of how I think I, grew up. And then if you talk to like my mom or my sister or someone else, they've got a little bit of a different vantage point.
Right.
But if you weld them all together, I mean, the short narrative is this. If someone writing a book about me and my childhood, I think they would say I was a very sickly kid, first of all. So I have asthma, had asthma since I was 2 years old. My mom likes to say that I was hospitalized 50 times before I was 5 years old. So, I mean, I spent a lot of time in the hospital due to my asthma. I actually flatlined at one point when I was 9 years old. And I remember this distinctly. So I had one of those, true near-death experiences, see the white light, people call it like all that. I did it all, right? And then woke up like healthy and fine. Like, why am I in the hospital still? Like crazy. But I think that was the reason that's important to the journey or kind of my backstory is my mother was extremely protective of me, and I just couldn't do a lot. She didn't trust anybody else to care for me. Rightfully so, by the way. And I mean, I was an asthmatic, right? I had a machine, I had to take it 3 times a day. I was on pills, you know what I mean? Like I couldn't just rip and run like other kids could. And when I did, it was like, as soon as 3 o'clock hit, I had to come inside and take this machine. But because of that, I didn't get to go on trips. I didn't get to travel when my cousins went places. Like I just, I was more of a homebody. And I think that gave me this passion to want more, to take more control of myself, my health, my life. And we were not very financially well off. So I mean, we struggle financially, not poor. I wouldn't call it poor, but we were definitely lower middle class. I was on free lunch in high school, so just to give you some context. And we just didn't have a lot of money. So I think for me, the two things that shaped me were not having a lot of money and then not really being allowed to do a bunch of stuff based on health things. I wrestled in high school and wrestled in middle school as well. And I think that was probably a real critical point for me because it allowed me to take ownership of everything going on around me.
Gotcha.
Wrestling's it's a tough sport, man. And my little one is wrestling now. We always have to have some real heart to hearts because it's not like other team sports where, oh, you missed the ball, you missed the shot. Okay, well, Ricky missed the shot too, right? It's not your fault you lost,
Right.
Wrestling is you, man. There's no
Right.
scapegoat. You out there in this little tiny singlet, you exposed in every way possible. And if you lose, you get pinned. It's a masculine, it's archaic, right? It's caveman-esque. And it brings out the emotions. And if you have the mental toughness to get through that, you can really get through anything in your life. And I always reflect back on that because whenever I'm going through a hard period, I have to remind myself that I've done tough things. So whether it was going through bankruptcy at General Motors, whether it's, having a deal that's not panning out, whether it's relationship, whatever it is, you've got to have moments you can look back on in your life that gives you the confidence and the credibility to say, no, I could do this. Gotcha. And you got to do tough things, right? You can't be a tough person if you've never done tough things. So what can you point to in your life that says, okay, you've been through worse. You're a tough kid. I saw you get through that. You're not a quitter. I didn't quit. I lost every match my freshman year. Didn't quit. Came back, finished with my name on the board for career wins.
Nice.
I wasn't a great wrestler. Okay, just to be clear, I was not, state champion or nothing like that. But I was consistent. I showed up. I was resilient, and that's something that I learned about myself that I can take with me today because you got to develop these traits, right? You can't just wake up one day and pretend to be something that you've never been your entire life. So for me, I like to identify those kind of things so I can remind myself of who I am. And I think everyone needs to do that, right? We always talk about mindset and how important mindset is, but you can't just wake up and say something that just isn't true. It's not a reflection of who you've been throughout your life. So but you can't identify those moments, right? And that's what's important.
Yeah. So I do have a question about when you were wrestling, right? And what that was like, being that you had your sickness, you had asthma. What were the challenges that you found from somebody that didn't have asthma? And what did you have to overcome in that situation?
Well, my asthma got better. So first of all, I was able to manage it as I got older. As I got into the young teens, I didn't have to take the machine everywhere, which was great. I remember the day they took me off the machine. I thought it was like, I cried, dude. Like it was, I'm about to cry now, man. It was an emotional day. It was a very emotional day because picture, that's all I knew my entire life, is this medicine, right? This medication I was taking every day. And it was part of it. And they basically said, hey, your lungs have developed to the point where, you still got to monitor, you still need to take these inhalers around with you, but you'd have to take the machine. So it gave me a sense of freedom, and then I could manage it. And so whenever I was doing something that was heavy cardio or competitive, whatever, I had to take my inhalers before, but I was, pretty much like every other kid at that point. So I think it allowed me to progress in a way where I didn't have to worry about those limitations as much.
Gotcha. Now, and you said something else that was interesting when it came to facing tough challenges in life.
Sorry, I went on that rant, dog.
It's all good. It's all good. I mean, it's part of the experience. I feel you. So you're saying how you're able to tap into tough things that you've done before, right? And something that I bring up, and I know people that have watched this podcast before, I know I bring this up quite a bit. But there were two things that I remember doing that it was a test of how can I develop my discipline, right? So they were like discipline exercises, and they took extended periods of time. So the first thing I did was, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Eric Thomas, the motivational speaker.
Of course.
Yeah. So I remember this was like years ago, and his thing was, you need to exercise your discipline just like you exercise any muscle in your body. And so you don't know how disciplined you are unless you actually go and put yourselves through situations to where you can actually overcome a thing. So he said, in order to do that now, to actually create that atmosphere, he said, think about something that you love or something that you really enjoy doing, and go without it for 100 days. And so I start thinking about stuff. I'm like, okay, cool. Well, it sounds good, but what will I actually do that, for that 100 days? So at the time, and for some people, it sounds kind of, weird or whatever, but I love chicken wings. I love, fried chicken. I love, like, there's certain foods that I like. And I love, ribs and all that stuff. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to go 100 days without chicken or pork. And I just said, like, that following day I was going to do that. And so from there, it was day one, I found myself in like a drive-through in Popeyes. I'm like, wait, hold on. What am I doing? This is day one. Like, what am I doing? So I'm like, okay, let me find some other things to eat. So I'm like, okay, I guess I could do fish. I guess I could do this. And so then I started realizing, like, oh, this is really difficult for me. And so every day it was just me having to pre-plan, okay, what am I going to do outside of the thing that I'm used to doing? Right. And then as days just kind of progressed, then it became easier. And fast forward on, past 100 days, I was able to accomplish that. And so there are other instances to where I had to look back like, okay, well, I know this is difficult. I know I have to kind of buckle down and do this thing. Let me tap into that 100 days of not eating chicken or pork. The second thing I did was, you heard of 75 hard.
Absolutely.
Sure. Yeah. So, but I did it for 100 days. And
Ooh,
so from
congrats to
that,
you, man. That is not easy.
Yeah, it was crazy. And so from there, I had to do the 10 pages a day. And at the time I wasn't a big reader, but now got tons of books that I'm reading. All that came from the 100 hard. So reading, gallon of water, doing the 2 exercises, one outside, progress pictures, and no junk food, and like following a particular diet. So all of that had to be done for 100 days. And at first I wasn't going to do it, but it was me speaking to other people about me saying, I'm thinking about doing this. And it was like the doubt that I kind of saw from other people, like, oh, why would you do that? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Oh, like, why would you do? Because at the time I was saying 75 days. I was like, oh, why would you do 75 days? It doesn't make any sense. Just do this, like, whatever. And so the reason why I went 100 is because, like, okay, well, y'all think I can't do it for 75. I'm going to do it for 100 days. And at the end of it, you guys will be able to see. It was probably the hardest thing I ever had to do, to just constantly just do this thing every single day. And in order to stay on it, I had like a checklist to be like, okay, did I get my gallon in? Some nights I'd be like, man, I didn't get my gallon. So I got to sit there in the kitchen, just like, got to get this gallon in
water.
And so it's interesting that you say that, because it's like, there are times to where I got to tap in to those challenges. So I guess now, being a wrestler and going into multifamily, right? What are some instances that you came across, whether it was a deal or a certain situation that came across, or whether it's business structure or whatever? What was a challenge that you had that maybe under normal circumstances, if you didn't have those hard times, it would probably be like, it's not worth it. But you're like, you know what? Now it's time for me to shine. So what are some of those examples?
So one, I love everything you just said, man. And for me, I think there's two sides to it. One is being able to tap into that person, but then it's also that outside motivation. And it sounds like you're kind of similar to me, where if people doubt you, that's a motivating factor, and that switch flips. Like one of the real reasons I wrestled for the 4 years is I used to be in marching band as well. And there's a dude in band. He sat behind me, and I was talking to this girl next to me. And I'm like, yeah, I think I'm gonna try for the wrestling team. And he overheard me and said, oh, you'll never make it. He's like, it's so hard. I wrestled last year. Oh man, it was so brutal. It was tough. And this dude went on for like 5 minutes telling me that dude every day when practice was hard and someone's twisting my arm through next to my ear. And I'm like, nah, man, I don't want to do this. I thought of that dude, and I said, I will never give that dude the pleasure of knowing I quit. Keep in mind, this dude barely knew who I was, never talked to this guy. This was an insignificant moment in his life, like truly insignificant. He has no recollection of it. He actually came out his junior year, which was my sophomore year, and I made it a point to like try to, take him on every time. This kid never remember, I never brought it up to him, but it was like a throwaway line for him. and it drove me for 4 years.
Wow. I
So
love it. I love
so
it.
so to the multifamily, I think part of it is we've got to build our confidence. And that's the thing. And sometimes that confidence comes from, truly being confident. That's great. Sometimes that confidence has to come from fear of failure. And for me, when it comes to the financials, I talked about my upbringing. Well, how many people do you talk to or read about who make money and then are broke? Lottery winners, right? They make money, they blow it all in 2 years. NFL athletes, right? So I I have done what people told us to do. I went to college, first person in my family to graduate from college. I got a quote unquote good job, right? So I'm making money, but it wasn't enough. And I realized very quickly, and that's why I'm staying back in my time at GM. I realized, man, even with all of this, at any moment, somebody just decide I'm not their guy. And I'm back on look, updating my resume and hoping I can find another gig, right? So real estate became something that was a means to insulate my job security starting out. That's
Right.
the way I did it. My wife and I, we before we got married, we talked a lot about our finances, where we wanted to be, what we wanted to do, and how we wanted to create, save our money and invest. And real estate was the thing we wanted to invest in. So started with a 2-unit building in Chicago. When we moved there, house hacked it, lived in one unit, rented out the other unit. I did a lot of research before that first investment, talking to people and just reading as much as I could, reading books, blogs, everything I could, networking, going to RIA events. And that gave me the confidence to move forward with that first investment. From there, we bought a 3-unit building, which is our first pure investment because I didn't live in that one. So that was a pure investment, right? The numbers had to work. And that performed well. So from there, I said, okay, well, let's go commercial. Let's scale up. Let's get an 8-unit building. Now I'm getting a commercial loan. I'm hiring a property management company. And then around that time is when I realized, okay, what we're doing is working, but it's slow. I'm buying a property every 2 years because I'm saving. My wife and I are saving up our money. Once we have enough money to buy another property, we start looking and shopping, and then we ultimately pull the trigger.
Right.
And that's when I started to learn about working with other people and syndication. So we went through hardships. That 8-unit didn't perform as well as I would have liked for it to perform. I learned some things, and made some mistakes. Around the same time, I started flipping some houses. I had a partner who was a developer and, really trusted that person's expertise. They grew too fast. And, when we talked about the challenges or concerns that I had, they brushed them off. And ultimately, we ended up losing money on those flip projects. So I definitely had to step back and evaluate what I was doing, what I liked, what I didn't like, what was working, what wasn't working. And that allowed me to really refine my investing thesis and my criteria. And the one thing I'll tell your listeners is I think it's really important for you to identify which investment strategy is right for you. I love apartment investing. I love multifamily. I love syndication. That doesn't mean it's right for you. You might love flipping houses. You might like wholesaling. You've got to look at your situation holistically, your network, the relationships you have, the market you're in. Like, what advantages do you have, and use that? And for me, it was, okay, I was in corporate America, so I understood business. I understood how to read P&Ls. I understood marketing strategies. I understood networking and client management, project management. So all of those skills were transferable. And I felt like I had a pretty decent network of people at that point in my career. So I felt like, okay, well, maybe I can pull some people together. Maybe I can orchestrate a team and lead a deal, or, bring some folks together to invest with me. So I kind of went in that direction. If you don't feel you have that, or you have limited capital, or you have limited time,
Right.
I would suggest you look at it and figure out, what do you have, and invest accordingly.
Gotcha. Now, I understand you went into the duplex and you kind of went on from there. Now, as far as real estate as a whole, now you have skills that you already possess. What was it specifically about real estate to where you looked at that and said, okay, that's the vehicle I'll go in, rather than some other folks saying that they'll do like online stores or stocks or options or whatever, which, you could be successful at anything. But what specifically about real estate did you see and was like, you know what, this is the vehicle for me?
I think there are probably a few factors, right? So, one, and probably the most important or the most relevant, is reading the book Rich Dad Poor Dad. I read that coming out of college, and to me, it was the first. It just opened up my eyes to finances and how it worked, right? And even when I got into corporate America, and looked around, you could see it, right? You could see people who are making $200,000, $300,000, $400,000. And yes, they had nice cars and nice homes, but when we were going through bankruptcy, you could see the stress and anxiety these people had. And I had a hard time processing that because I'm like, you make plenty of money. Like, what are you so like? You don't have investments and other things, right? No, they did not. They were living off of that check, right? Even though it was a huge check, they were spending that huge check on private school and everything that comes with it.
Right.
So I kept reverting back to Rich Dad Poor Dad and some of the lessons and philosophies in that book, which, regardless of what you think, I felt like it was great for someone who didn't grow up around money or didn't understand the way money worked or finances worked. So that was one thing. I think the other thing was, there's that quote that 90% of, millionaires make their money through real estate.
Right.
And how accurate that quote is debatable. But for me, it just seemed obvious, right? Like homes are around, I mean, picking stocks. I don't know how to pick stocks. I bought books on it. I mean, I used to read a bunch of Beat the Streets by Peter Lynch and all sorts of stock books. It was complicated. I couldn't wrap my head around how to do it the right way. When I read real estate books, it seemed pretty straightforward. You buy a property, you figure out what the rent's going to be, you figure out what your expenses are going to be, you keep the profit. Like, it's when I was in advertising, I used to joke with one of my directors, and he would always quote, there's a South Park episode where it was like, step one, it was like step one, invest in this, step three, profit. And it just like skipped step two completely, right? But like real estate was that way. It's like step one, invest in real estate. Step three, profit. It's like, I'm sure there's more stuff in between, but it felt pretty straightforward. So for me, it just seemed on the surface level basic enough where I could get it. And I would say the last point was when I was in college, I had a professor, and go back to lines people say that probably a throwaway for her heavily impacted my life. She was actually talking about her brother, and this was her quote unquote kind of screw up brother. And she was saying like, oh, this guy didn't go to college and blah, 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 but he owns some real estate, and he's doing well off of that, I guess. Now this is a professor, right? She's got her degrees and I'm like, so if your screw up brother could invest in real estate and make it work. Exactly. So in my head, it was like, I put a pin in that, right? And it's one of those things where I would always kind of refer back to these little points. So when I ultimately decided to pull that trigger, it just kind of made sense to me.
Gotcha. Now, you mentioned how when you were partnering with the person that you were flipping properties with, at the time, he was growing a little too fast. So what do you mean by he was growing too fast?
Well, so essentially he doubled. When I met him, let's say I met him in November. When I met him in November, he had 5 projects going at a time, and he had his crew, whatever his crew was. Let's just say it was 5 guys in the crew. By March, he had 10 projects going on at the same time, but the same crew. He's still same 5 guys.
Gotcha.
So I would ask him, hey, you double the amount of projects you've taken on. Why are you not growing your staff? And he's like, oh, don't worry about it. And at that point, I kind of knew, I was like, oh man, this is going to be a problem. But that's what it was. He didn't have that vision of, what resources do I need now to scale? And later on, like probably a couple of years after we finished those projects, I ran into the lead contractor, and we just had a conversation. I'm like, man, what happened? Because that guy, unfortunately for him, he lost everything. It was really rough for him. He was ducking, he used to have to hide his wife's car because they were trying to repo it all the time. So every time I saw him, he was like hiding from everybody. And he didn't do me wrong. He got caught in a bad situation. Yeah. And their plan was flawed from the beginning. And I'm like, it was a stupid plan in hindsight. Like I didn't know their real numbers, but they were basically doing full gut renovations for $140,000, but it was actually costing them $160,000. But they told us 140. So our budget was 140, and they were going in losing 20K. And for some reason, they thought they could lose deals or lose money up front and then make it up on the back end on future deals. And I'm like, wow, y'all are.
Wait, hold on. So the plan was to lose money.
Apparently, but we didn't know this as investors. This was never disclosed to us. So we would go and they would give us our budget, right? They would say, hey, the budget to do this project is 140. And everybody, they used to do trolley. So anybody in Chicago may know what I'm talking about if you were investing this time. But they used to do trolley tours. So they would invite, it was an open thing, contractor, investor. Hey, you want to come see what they were doing? You could come look. And they would drive around their properties on a trolley. They would go to one of the finished products and they would show you, hey, here's the different stages of renovation. So it was picture an assembly line for houses, for house renovations.
Yeah.
They would buy the same kind of house, a bungalow in Chicago on the north side, northwest side, or northwest side of the city. They would buy a bungalow, cut the top off, do a second story addition, full gut rehab the entire home. And it took them typically about 6 months from end to end, right? So they were doing this, and this was the thing. I'm like, oh, this is great. This is like pretty much a turnkey renovation model.
Yeah.
So I partnered with the developer, and he had partnered with another guy that I knew, and we walked through all the properties. Other contractors would come in there and they would say like, man, how are you able to do this for 140? And the answer to most of us was like, oh, well, maybe they're getting economies of scale. No, the real answer was they couldn't. They couldn't, and that's why the whole thing was the house of cards that fell apart. But again, I didn't know that until it was way too late, because every contractor, when I had to take over the project, the quotes I was getting to finish it were way above that 140 number.
So what it sounds like to me was it was more so of a way to, I guess, gain clout and saying, hey, look at the deals that I'm doing. And it's not that the properties weren't being done. They probably looked great at the end. And when you looked at the numbers, it was just a way to attract more investors. And did he not know that he was losing money, or what was going on?
I will put it to you this way. It would be the blueprint definition of a Ponzi scheme if we were investing into his company directly. The only reason it wasn't is I owned the property directly and I hired him and paid the contractor directly. So he technically never really took the money, and he was supposed to take a portion of the profits once we sold the asset. So that he got paid on the back end. So again, I think his point was, okay, well, if you sell it for whatever, I'll get my cut of this. So yes, hey, dude, you're going to lose money, but if you got 5 projects going, we're not going to scale the number of crews, because we're going to pay these guys the same amount of money, even though now they're doing more work. And it just didn't work. I get what he was trying to do in theory. It was a bad strategy.
Jeez. Okay. Well, I'm assuming you don't work with this guy anymore.
Well, that guy, life hits you, and I think one day he got really, really overwhelmed, and it was a Friday afternoon, like 12, and he called me drunk out of his mind, and he was throwing a contractor under the bus. And at that very moment, I knew that was the last time I was going to talk to him.
Wow.
And I haven't seen or heard from him since.
Jeez. Gotcha. Well, I wish him the best. Hopefully he learned from his mistakes. And I know when it comes to this business and just being in real estate, and especially with social media and just posting the type of stuff that you do, it can get addicting to where it's like, well, you just want to keep up the facade of like, look at all of the deals that I'm doing, and you want to document this, and you want to show that you know what you're doing. But at the end of the day, you have to make money, and you can't look at it. I'm not sure if it was maybe looked at from a standpoint of, okay, well, yes, I'm losing money, but maybe I'll look at it as, this is my marketing budget. The $20,000 that I'm losing, this is all towards marketing, and then I'll just post. I mean, it can get addicted to post this the information, but it's like, at the end of the day, if you're not making money, then you're just messing around, and you're wasting people's time, and you could put people in a bad situation, which is why it's important to always be transparent with whenever you have investors, show them the actual numbers, and make sure they're trusted. But you're saying how, and there's multiple situations that this came up. So while you were in band, how the guy, he mentioned something and how that inspired you. And when you were with the professor, she just kind of said something about her brother. Now, something that I love to do, and I tell people a lot more of this now, I haven't said this before a lot, was to just be open to being inspired by the outside world. Right. And so is that something that you always possess, to where it's you're going to use something as motivation, or you're going to use something as inspiration, or is that something that just kind of happened later on in life?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important to be open-minded, right? And allow yourself to be inspired and allow yourself to explore different things. And quite frankly, when you have conviction for something, that conviction is developed over time based on, again, the experiences you have or whatever. And that inspiration is important because you've got, I mean, that starts that, that philosophy, that belief pattern and everything. And for me, all those experiences were key. I would say this too, man. Go back to childhood. I remember my mother scrapping to pay rent. Like calling my uncle, her brother. Like just jumping, through hoops to come up with money to give to some dude who came to the front door on the first of the month.
Yeah.
And I remember one day looking out the window as he drove off in I think he had a Lincoln. Um, and I remember thinking, man, I'd rather be on the other side of this transaction,
Right. Right.
right? Someone, and not I don't mean to take advantage of people or to make someone work that hard to pay me. That's not what I'm getting at. What I'm saying is, um, he provided service, and my mother worked really hard to take care of it and pay rent. And I would rather be on the other side of that transaction as opposed to the person scrambling to pay rent. So that was always very, very important to me. So we get these moments of inspiration, and I didn't think anything about that moment, right? But at some point, fast forward, I clearly remember it. So it was something that was an idle thought, and I think that's important for us to understand as well, is that you may go through something or see something or experience something, and you don't know how it influences your life moving forward.
Right.
Right. That's
Exactly.
why we got to be careful with our thoughts, careful what we say. And if I would have went down a different path, I'm never thinking about that moment again. But when people ask questions like, well, what got you in real estate? It's like, oh, now I have to actually stop and think. And it's like, there are little micro moments, micro engagements that took place over, 20 years, 25 years
Mhm.
that ultimately helped me believe that no, this is the side you want to be on. And it's important to have that conviction because when I lose $50,000 on a real estate flip, it's very easy for people to say, that didn't work.
Right.
Let's go do something else. Right.
Right. Right.
That didn't work. Then let's go
Mhm.
do something else.
Right.
But I knew, and the important thing as an investor is that what you didn't work. Right. So let's take that and debrief from it. Well, what didn't work and why didn't it work? And what should you do differently? And for me, the reason my flip didn't work is we went way over budget. I had the wrong partner. But also I was investing in an asset that didn't produce income. So now we only invest in income producing assets in desirable locations where there's cash flow. There's cash flow, and then there's some upside appreciation because my skill set is more in managing projects, right? Not necessarily managing contractors, like the construction element of it. We
Right.
can do that,
Mhm.
but that doesn't excite me. And that's not where I spent the last 15, 20 years of my life is managing projects and crews, right? So
Right.
that's where I'm comfortable is you tell me what's going on, let me get all the information and let me help you drive it versus arguing with the contractor on the price per square foot for a piece of lumber.
Right.
Like that's
Gotcha.
I don't have the leverage there, right? You know what the
Right.
lumber is, and I can get mad that you went over budget. What are my options? I don't know the options, right? But
Right.
I do know how to manage, you know, leases. I do know how to look at marketing and say, okay, hey, we're not getting enough traffic for our property. Let's try this. Let's try this. And once we wrap this, I'm doing an asset management called my property management company, right? So
Gotcha.
those are conversations we have. We go through all of our numbers. What have we tried? What is working? What's not working? What do we want to do? What do you think we should do? Leading people, leading teams. That's my skill set. So that's my belief in real estate
Mhm.
and playing it at a larger level because I think that's the best utilization of those skills. And
Gotcha.
I think for every investor, we've got to figure that out for ourselves.
Gotcha. Now, I know you mentioned that you all had an 8 unit during the earlier parts of your
Yeah.
investing journey. Now, when did you decide that you needed to get partners, and what did that initial uh, process look like when deciding, okay, well, I'm going to need some help to really scale here? What steps did you take, and what triggered that?
It's an excellent question. So right when we bought the 8 unit, I remember feeling something different than I felt the first two properties. It wasn't the excitement with a little bit of anxiety. It was almost I don't want to call it depression, man, but I was definitely dejected. And I was dejected because we had just saved $130,000 to put down on his property. And all I could think about was, man, it's going to be another hike to save another $150,000. Like, man, this is going to take forever. And at that time, the new company I'm working for was actually getting ready to go into bankruptcy as well. So I had to step back and recalibrate to say, man, we started getting into real estate to provide ourselves some insulation from job loss. And I'm right back in this situation and I haven't fully insulated myself, right? I was equity rich, but I
Right.
was kind of cash flow, not really poor, but I didn't have the cash flow to be financially independent.
Right.
So I remember sitting down with a good friend of mine, and she had raised money for some of her projects. And I just started asking her more questions about it. And she kind of talked to me about it. And there's a saying that when the student is ready, the teacher will appear.
Yeah.
And within about a month, I ended up having a lunch meeting with a guy named Joe Fairless that was pretty well known. This was back in like 2015 or 2016. And Joe became my mentor. And
Is that the best ever guy?
best ever. Yep, best
Okay,
ever.
gotcha.
Yep.
Yeah.
So and that was important because I listened to Joe and his story, and at this time I think he had only done one real syndication deal. He only raised money for one deal.
Yeah.
But he's the first person I ever met who had raised money for a deal.
Exactly.
Right. So
Right.
so as we talked, and he was coaching, I'm like, this sounds good. And I would say too, like at that point, I had gone to some of those like HGTV seminars and all that kind of stuff, right? So I had to ask myself a few times, like, hey, are you willing to invest, like to pay money for coaching and education? And I thought about it. I didn't think those programs were the right fit for me, but I felt at that time, given that I just bought the A unit, given that I just talked to my friend who she had raised money for a deal, and now I'm talking to this guy who had just raised $1 million, and it wasn't from his family. So I'm like, okay, because I didn't have rich family members. So I was like, yeah, it's definitely got to be outside the family.
Right.
So talking to him made me comfortable. And then the next deal we ended up doing was it took me some time. It was 192 units.
Oh,
And
wow. Gotcha.
yeah, and that was a partnership. So we were a part of the GP team and someone else was leading it. But if you would have asked me in that moment, hey, do you think you could do a 100+ unit deal? I would have laughed at you. Like,
Right.
my goal was not to do I didn't know what syndication was.
Right.
My goal was to find a 20 unit, and instead of having to bring 200,000, I'll bring 100, you bring 100, right?
Right.
And partner that way. That was my vision. Was okay, if I could partner with somebody, bring half the equity, maybe I can run twice as fast.
Gotcha.
And as I learned about what Joe ended up doing in syndication and scaling that way, that slowly became something that became more enticing, which also led to, again, me having to create this business and start taking necessary steps to build up my network, my database, and connect with other investors.
Gotcha. Now, there's different philosophies of different people when it comes to the deal size that you should start with. There's folks that say start off with a single family, then go up to duplex, and then gradually go up to larger units. And then you have people that say if you're doing anything that's below 100 units, you're wasting your time. And then you have some folks that's in the middle that's like, okay, you know what? Maybe start off with 20 to 40 unit, and then from there partner with other folks and maybe be an LP and do something bigger. So where do you fall within that spectrum of if you're going to do multifamily, if you have a network, if you have a person or a mentor that you can contact that can assist you with underwriting and capital raising and all that stuff, what would you say is a good spot to start for somebody that's like, this is my first deal and I'm going to be the one that's marketing to find these deals? What criteria should I look for as far as size? What would you say to that?
First, I want to say one of my pet peeves is when people give blanketed advice to people without understanding their situation. So if for someone to say, if you're looking at anything less than 100 units, you're wasting your time, I just think that's terrible feedback. You don't know this person's situation, capabilities, network, like goals. So how can I say that to someone, right? So I would start by saying, what are you trying to accomplish? And then what do you have available to you? Like that should dictate what you do. If you tell me, John, I just want enough passive income to quit my job. Okay, what's that number? What is that number? And then we need to reverse engineer the plan for you. So like when I talked to you offline, but we have a mastermind program. We also do one-on-one coaching. And what people don't realize is there's a big difference between mentoring and coaching. And mentoring is telling people how to do what you've done, right? I'm going to show you how to do what I did. Follow me, follow what I've done. Coaching is different. Coaching is looking at you for who you are, what you can do, and trying to get the most out of that ability. If you think about like a basketball coach, um, you're not going to coach I'm gonna use the old basketball reference, but you're not going to coach Kobe Bryant the same way you coach Shaq, right?
Right.
Kobe's got a different skill set than what Shaq can do.
Right.
You're not going to tell this guy, no, you need to work in the post and do this. Now, if you're Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, you're going to mentor and show Kobe or Shaq how to do this. Hey, I'm going to show you how to do the sky hook. I'm going to show you how to do this, right? I'm going to mentor you on how to do what I've done.
Gotcha.
That's a difference, right? So when you're looking at help education, I think you need to be kind of clear on what you want. Do you want to follow somebody's blueprint and path, which is great and a phenomenal way of doing that? Or do you need somebody to help you do what you want to do? What you're hoping to accomplish in life. So your original question was, what should someone do? I would start by your goals. What are you hoping to accomplish? Be clear on your goals. Because if you're not clear on your goals and what you want to get out of this, any place will work. And you may find yourself with a job that you didn't sign up for. Syndication, 100 plus units, it's a job. I know that there may be this allure that, people are out there doing whatever. You've got responsibilities. You got a job. You have people to answer to. They're clients, right? They're investors. You've got to answer them. You've got to make sure that you're keeping them whole and you're honest with them and you're communicating. So that's that. Some people don't want to deal with investors at all. So for them, having 5 units or 10 units is sufficient because they don't want to deal with other people. They want to make their decisions. They want to be, independent, and that's it. So I think you should ask yourself those questions first.
Gotcha.
I don't think anybody should start with single family rentals, and that's not a knock on it, but most people want to scale. Most people don't want to own a house. I've never met someone whose pure goal was to own one rental, right? Typically it's passive income to do X. And it's real hard to get that through a house, right? So maybe you want to own 5 houses or 5 rentals. And in that case, I would really urge you to go with either residential multifamily, 2 to 4 units, or go to smaller multifamily because you can get a 10 unit or a 5 unit and maybe meet your objectives that way. So I would definitely urge people to go more on the multifamily side. The size depends on a lot of other factors, which would be too complicated to get into now. But I think one thing I would ask you to ask yourself is, what skill sets do you possess? Do you have a big network? Do you have people who trust you? Can you look back on the experiences you've had and had success in your corporate career or your professional career? And if you have, and you think people will invest with you and partner with you, that may be a path you want to go. If not, but you have the money and you don't want to deal with people, then just buy the properties you want to manage, right? Or you want to own and hire a property management company. And then lastly, I would say you don't have to do any of this. You can also invest passively. And most of our partners, that's what they do. They have other things they want to do. They want the benefits that come from real estate investing, but they're not trying to be a landlord. They're not trying to flip. They're not trying to build this portfolio they got to manage. So they invest with groups like ours to get the perks of real estate investing without having to take on those responsibilities.
Gotcha. Now, through your experience from investing in multifamily, of course, you've experienced different situations, and you found different methods that work as far as acquiring properties, ways to manage, and ways to be successful. Now, what are some of, I'd say, the sauce of what you're doing that works for you, that you've had to kind of cultivate over time and say, okay, you know what? I know everybody probably does it this way, but we found that this way really works for us. So what's some of those things for you?
I think one is having strong broker relationships. So particularly if you're doing larger assets, and just think about it. If you've got a 200 unit apartment community, you're not going to sell to a dude who sent you a flyer, right? Or some dude who just sent you a text or a cold phone call. You're savvy enough. If you're savvy enough to own a 200 unit building, you're savvy enough to know that, the dude who's texting you is probably looking to buy it for pennies on a dollar.
Yeah.
So having those broker relationships is key. staying in top of mind with those brokers is absolutely critical for you to find those deals and opportunities. If you're playing in kind of the mid-size or the smaller multifamily range, you absolutely can go directly to sellers. And there it's about building relationships, having the blueprint. One thing for us is it definitely comes down to relationships. We like to have relationships with other investors. They may want to sell one day. They may have a lead on a deal. They may have an opportunity that they had under contract, but something else came up, and they're looking to wholesale. They're looking to partner and just keep a little bit of equity. So those relationships is absolutely key. I think one thing that is maybe different for us than other people is we are based in the Midwest. So I live in Cincinnati. I've lived in Chicago. I've lived in Detroit. Understand the Midwest really, really well. And the Midwest market has really good cash flow. But we do have appreciation. I think sometimes people think appreciation is only on the West Coast or something, but
Right.
our markets appreciate too, right?
Right.
So for us, we like to invest in areas that have strong demand: Cincinnati, Indianapolis, Columbus, Louisville. Those are some of the markets that we're targeting. And we focus there because, quite frankly, there's not as much competition. There's still competition and plenty of it.
Right.
But it's not like in Texas where, everyone you ever meet is looking to do a deal in Texas. So I
Gotcha.
think that gives us a little bit of an advantage there.
Gotcha. And so when it comes to developing broker relationships, similar to what you're saying, uh, from what I heard from different people that have organizations that teach how to get into multifamily, there's always the talk of brokers are the way to get deals, right? Instead of going directly to seller. I've heard of some people saying have the direct to seller be more so of a supplement to your marketing, but primarily the meat of you getting your deals are from brokers. So I guess you would agree with that as well, is that that's where you're basically going to get all your deals?
In larger commercial, yes, that's going to be the case. And for context, these brokers are doing everything you would do from a direct to seller standpoint to try to get that listing. So they're reaching out to these owners every month. They're
Right.
cold calling them. They're checking in with them. They're sending them, offers or BOVs.
Right.
So it's really difficult to reach that owner, the seller, when brokers are so proactive and they're trying to find the best buyer. Now you can. I'm not saying it's impossible. It's
Right.
absolutely possible.
Mhm.
But the other thing that happens is you don't know someone is a true seller when you're reaching out. Once they list it with a broker, they're serious about selling.
Right.
What happens most of the time when you go direct to seller on larger commercial, everyone's open for an offer.
Mhm.
Sure, you
Mhm.
want to make me an offer, great. But most of the time, again, savvy investors like you and I,
Yeah.
we want a deal, right? We're not going to pay top of the market. We want a deal.
Exactly. Right.
So our offer is not going to be that number that they think they could get, right?
Right. Right.
And that's kind of the challenge that I think most people face in that. So that's why brokers make a lot of sense. And then the other thing that helps with brokers is they're fielding many offers. If you go direct to a seller, that seller is always thinking, I wonder if I could get a better offer.
Mm, mhm, mhm.
And when you've got a broker, they've sent it out to a large database of individuals, and
Right.
essentially they're getting real feedback, and they can sleep at night knowing that, okay, no, I got the deal that the market said. Now, again,
Gotcha.
I think if there's a different issue, if you're solving a problem,
Right.
by all means, going direct to seller makes a lot of sense, right?
Right. Right.
But if you're just generally sending out or soliciting owners, you could be wasting a lot of time going through that process.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay. And so I know with wholesaling, because I started off as a wholesaler, uh, uh, one of the things that I would tell folks whenever they're starting wholesaling is before you actually start marketing for deals, I would say have your buyers list first or know who are going to be your buyers, and then you can get the deal. So that way you're not stuck with a property. And so with doing joint ventures, what I found is if you don't have that buyers list, but you just ran into a deal, I found that that was a great way of making sure that, yes, you may have to split the profit, but at least you're working with somebody that's credible and they can bring the value of bringing that buyer to you. So, do you JV with other syndication companies to bring you deals and you take on a project with them? or what is your thoughts on JVing with other people that bring a deal?
I'm definitely open to it. I think it's a smart way to partner and
Mhm.
to create opportunities, especially in a market where it's difficult or challenging to find
Mhm.
deals. So we can be pretty creative on deal structures. And I think either JV or bringing those people on to be a part of the general partnership team is a smart way of doing it.
Gotcha. And as far as owner financing and creative financing, do you do more of the owner financing now due to higher interest rates compared to a few years ago? Or is it all strictly agency debt or bridge loans? Are you still doing the regular loans, or are you incorporating more of that owner financing because of cheaper debt that was there before?
Owner financing is definitely becoming more and more viable. So it's a part of almost every conversation, at least to understand where the owner fits. You know, are they open to owner financing? Are they not open seller financing? So that's definitely part of the conversation. And we haven't done one with it yet. But I am anticipating that we will likely do one in the upcoming year.
Gotcha, gotcha. All right, cool. So, this part of the podcast, this is when we talk about books that we would recommend to our listeners. So, as I've showed before, tons of books that I have all around here that was kind of triggered from a challenge I did some years ago, and something that I've realized, and this may sound basic to a lot of people, but books are a hack to getting to the next level of whatever the topic is that you're wanting to understand. So whether it's real estate, whether it's flipping, whether it's mindset, whatever it is, people have learned things, accomplished success, and put it in a manual that you could then read and absorb yourself and cut 10 years off of where you are to where you want to be. So with that, what are three books that you would recommend that our listeners would or should read to take them to the next level?
Um, the first book I'm going to give you is Atomic Habits by James Clear. It's a phenomenal read. And if you're looking to improve your quality of life or to strengthen a skill or become a different person or enhance something, it really comes down to habits, right? And that book does a phenomenal job of breaking down how to do that. And it's the first book and maybe the only book that I've read where everything was immediately applicable. It wasn't high level philosophy or thinking. It was, you want to run, here's what you can do to be a runner,
Right,
right? And,
right.
and like now, you want to raise $10 million. Here's the first step to become a capital raiser or whatever that is, right? So I thought that book was just a phenomenal way to think about becoming the person you want to be. Second book I will give you is 10x is easier than 2x.
Mm.
That book is a really good read, and it really breaks down the philosophy of growth. You know, to double what you're doing, in theory, just do twice as much of what you've been doing, right?
Mhm.
If you want to double your business, all right, let's double down. To 10x, they'll require something completely different. You got to change your thinking, change your philosophy. If you want to, for instance, let's go back. You talked about 75 hard. Let's just
Mhm.
say losing weight, right?
Mhm.
If I'm if I just want to lose 2 pounds or 4 pounds, or I want to get, just a little small thing. Okay, hey, I just got to make little incremental changes here and there, right? And let's say I lost 2 pounds last month, and this month I want to lose 4 pounds. Okay, well, in theory, I should just double what I did.
Right,
If I
right.
want to lose 100 pounds,
Yeah.
I can't just, oh, okay, I'm just going to cut out this. Like, no, I have to reprogram my diet, my regimen, everything, right?
Yeah.
In business, it's the same thing. If you want to grow and scale and 10x what you're doing, you got to step all the way back and really identify what's the best use, the most profitable aspect of your business, and then how do you focus on that and
Wait,
not almost
hold
exclusively.
on, hold on, dude.
Yeah,
I've never heard this book before.
yeah,
So
it's
10x is
huge.
better
10,
than that
easier.
is
10x is easier than
10x
2x.
is easier.
I wanna say it's Darren Hardy, but I'll tell you. It's um it's a powerful read. It's from the same guys who wrote Who Not How. So it's by Dan Sullivan and Dr. Benjamin
Mm,
Hardy.
okay.
So it's kind of a Who Not How is kind of the precursor to this. And
Mhm.
then 10x is easier than 2x is yeah, it's a phenomenal book. It just really forces you to really think about what it takes to really reach exponential growth.
Gotcha.
The third book, I'm just gonna say it depends on what you're trying to accomplish. The Best Ever Apartment Syndication Ever book is definitely on that list. If you need more mindset, or Rich Dad Poor Dad is a classic that you should certainly keep in mind. Who Not How, which I just mentioned, is another one. So I think it just depends on what you're trying to get at, but there's those are more than the three that you've allotted me, so I'll
I
leave it
love
there.
it. Above and beyond. There you go. All right. So now this is our lightning round. So this is when I ask you three questions, and they're kind of random. Some of them a bit more serious. And I don't have any goofy ones today. So these are more so interesting, makes you think a little bit for these. So if you were to invest in a state that is outside of all the states that you invest in right now, what state would it be and why?
Interesting. So I don't own anything in Indiana, but I like Indiana partially because it is. I spent 8 years in Chicago, so I spent a lot of time in Chicago, and to get to Chicago, I got to drive through Indiana. But also Indiana, the way their tax system is set up, I think is favorable for real estate investors. It's generally favorable for apartments and multifamily. But one thing I love, and this is one of those things that I'll whisper because I want everybody to beat me to deals, but
there you go. It's
one
between
thing I
me and
love
you.
is, and everybody listening. Indiana, what they typically do, and I'm primarily talking about Indianapolis, but I think this is applicable across the state. On the sales tax, or on the tax reassessments, they cap that at 5%. So in most markets, when you buy a property, and let's say it was the previous owner had it for 5 million, you bought it for 8 million. Well, they're going to reassess it for $8 million, right? In Indiana, typically they will cap that only at 5% increase. So they're going to take that 5 million, add 5%, and then it's going to be capped at that 5% number. So that makes deals a bit more affordable because you're not getting that full on tax reassessment. So that's one thing I like about Indiana that other markets don't have. And then the last thing too is, like, Chicago's losing population, and a lot of those folks are not necessarily leaving the Chicago metro area. They're just actually moving to kind of northern Indiana. So there's some benefits there.
Gotcha. And so have you heard of any other states that are doing something similar to that? That increase cap?
Not to my knowledge. I mean, obviously I focus on the markets that I'm paying attention to, so I'm not as sure. I'm sure there are markets that do it, but not to my knowledge.
Gotcha. All right. So number two, if you were to interview one person and you have, say, 2 hours to interview this person, and they had to have been born within the last 200 years, so they could be dead or alive, who would that person be and why?
Definitely making me think here. So, I'm going to say Dr. Martin Luther King.
Okay.
And the reason is I would be curious to understand, or I would want to understand, the resolve that it took to endure everything he was doing to maintain his conviction in the face of every challenge, both from people he was trying to help and outside forces, to stay so focused on a mission that cost him his life. So I think that, because I'm trying to think of like powerful conversations, and I think there's some lessons there. We talk about daily habits and affirmations and stuff like that. Guy had to have an unbelievable, network surrounding him and belief in his mission to carry it out as far as he did. So I think that would definitely be the person I'd want to interview.
Gotcha. All right. And number three, if you are not doing real estate right now, what would you do?
I was in marketing for 15 years, and unlike a lot of people, I enjoyed my job. It was
Gotcha.
fun. I had a good time doing it, right? And so I would probably be still doing that. I will say that I've always liked working with entrepreneurs, so maybe consulting entrepreneurs, but somewhere in that space is where I would be.
Gotcha. All right, good deal. So now I understand that you have so your investment company, your syndication company. So tell us more about that company and what it stands for, and what sets you apart from other companies.
Yeah, Casmon Capital Group invest in multifamily, primarily in the Midwest, along with the Southeast region. And for us, what we're trying to do is, partner with everyday professionals. Again, we know real estate works. It's been proven by many folks over the years. It's not like crypto. It's not speculative. It's not something that could pop. It's there. It's tried and true. We have an affordable housing crisis going on in the country right now. If you invest with sound principles, it's pretty resilient from that standpoint. So we are always looking to connect with people who want to learn more. If you're specifically interested in like deal structures and how syndication works, we have a sample deal package on our website. So if you go to casmoncapital.com/sample deal, you can download that, get added to our newsletter, but also start wrapping your head around terminology and deal structure and the what ifs that come within the business. And again, there's no commitment or anything like that. It's no cost for you. It's a deal structure that is a sample deal. It's not a real deal. It's something that we kind of cobbled together just to illustrate what you may look at or the kind of things you might see. But I think it's a very valuable resource. So check that out at casmoncapital.com/sample deal.
Gotcha. I love that. All right, cool. Now, and I understand you do the one-on-one coaching and the mastermind. So tell us about that as well.
Well, I'll start with the mastermind. I mean, we definitely do the one-on-one coaching, but the mastermind I think is pretty, both affordable and attainable for most people. It's only $89 a month, and we bring in we do group coaching calls. We bring in industry experts to highlight different aspects of the business, everything from raising capital to social media standing out to deal structures and SEC things. We just brought an attorney to talk through all those kind of things.
Nice.
We record everything. We have it up. We have a library of content that's available. If you've got a deal, you want to get some feedback, we allow you to present. But networking is key. And I think having a relationship with other like-minded individuals to partner with, to bounce ideas off of, that's really critical if you're looking to scale. So that is available on our website as well. If you just go to casmoncapital.com, you can learn more about that. And on top of that, we do offer the one-on-one coaching. That I would say, hey, if you're interested, email me and we can talk through the specifics on that.
Gotcha. Good deal. And I think I saw that you have a podcast as well.
Yeah.
Sure. So talk to me about the podcast.
Yeah. Multifamily Insights is the show. We've been podcasting for 6 years plus.
Oh, nice.
Well over 550 episodes. So check it out anywhere you listen to podcasts.
There you go. And what was the name of it again?
Multifamily Insights.
All right. Awesome. Good deal. All right. So, like I was explaining to you before, the listeners that we have here, they're typically folks that are getting into real estate. So the brand is called Your First Step. So our thing is to guide people towards their first step on what they should actually do to get into a individual or specific sector. So with multifamily investing, what is your first step? If you decided like, hey, this works for me, you had your criteria before about the network, access to capital, all these things. So what is your first step when it comes to getting into multifamily?
If you want to get into multifamily, your first step should be identifying someone to either mentor you or coach you or lead you. That someone can be a partner. It could be a JV partner. It could be a general partner. So you're investing as an LP, but find somebody who has experience and work with them. Do not go out there and wing it by yourself. Okay. Find somebody who's got some experience. It could be a paid coach. It could be a paid mentor. It could be an unpaid coach or unpaid mentor, but find somebody who's done it, who's got some experience, because they're going to help you navigate the landscape.
Gotcha. I love it. All right. And so words of wisdom for our listeners. What do you got for them?
Listen, everything's achievable, right? If you've seen someone else do it, you can do it, but you've got to believe in yourself. You also have to believe in the process and be willing to invest in yourself. And you're going to invest one way or the other, right? You're either going to invest time or you're going to invest money, or you're not going to get to the results you're looking for. So take the time, educate yourself, continue to listen to podcasts like this, but you got to take action to make it happen.
Gotcha. All right, John. Hey, thank you so much, man. I greatly appreciate you. Thank you for doing this episode with us.
Absolutely. Hey, thank you for having me today. Great talking to you, and I look forward to staying in touch.
All right. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Your First Steps podcast. Let us know what you thought about this episode by leaving a review. And don't forget to subscribe.